The flames were already crawling up the east wing when Mason kicked through the warped doorframe and heard his son screaming. Noah's voice cut through the roar of burning wood and collapsing drywall like a knife through Mason's chest. Behind him, Serena Vale, the woman he'd pulled half-frozen from a wrecked SUV 3 weeks ago, stood bleeding in the snow, staring at the armed men who'd just torched his motel. She wasn't some stranded traveler. She was a billionaire CEO with enemies powerful enough to burn down everything Mason had left. And now his boy was trapped inside because Mason had made the mistake of caring about a stranger. If you want to see how Mason saves his son from this nightmare, and what happens when a broke single father collides with a ruthless billionaire on the run, stay with me until the end. And please, hit that like button and drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Mason Reed stood behind the front desk of the Mountain Ridge Motel at 2 in the morning, duct taping a cracked section of PVC pipe that fed water to rooms 4 through 7. The heating system rattled like it was coughing up its last breath. Outside, the wind screamed through the pines and hurled fists of snow against windows that hadn't been replaced since before Noah was born. He twisted the tape tight, his fingers numb even inside the frayed work gloves. The pipe hissed but held. For now. "Dad?" Mason turned. Noah stood in the doorway wearing his dinosaur pajamas and mismatched socks, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His dark hair stuck up in wild directions. He looked so much like his mother, it hurt. "Hey, buddy, what are you doing up?" "I heard noises." "Just the pipes acting up again. Nothing to worry about." Noah stepped closer, squinting at the desk where Mason had spread out a stack of bills beside his laptop. The screen glowed with a spreadsheet full of red numbers. The boy couldn't read all the words yet, but he understood colors well enough. "Are we okay?" Noah asked quietly. Mason forced a smile and closed the laptop. "We're always okay. You say that a lot." "Because it's true." Noah didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. He'd learned not to. That was the worst part. Watching an 8-year-old kid learn when to stop asking questions because he already knew the answers would just make his father look more tired. "Go back to bed," Mason said gently. "School tomorrow." "It's Saturday." "Right. Saturday." Mason rubbed his face. Time had stopped meaning much beyond which bills were due when... "Still, you need sleep." Noah hesitated, then crossed the lobby and wrapped his arms around Mason's waist. Mason held him tight, feeling the small heartbeat against his ribs. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, Noah. More than anything." The boys shuffled back toward their apartment behind the office. Mason waited until he heard the door click shut before he opened the laptop again and stared at the numbers that wouldn't add up, no matter how many times he rearranged them. The motel had 18 rooms. On a good week in summer, he could fill 12. In winter, especially a winter like this one, with storms rolling through the mountains every few days like they had a personal grudge against the highway, he was lucky to rent 3. The mortgage was 4 months overdue. The property taxes were worse, and the bank had stopped returning his calls 2 weeks ago, which meant they'd moved past negotiation and into foreclosure paperwork. He'd bought this place 6 years ago with his wife, Claire, back when they'd believed in fresh starts and second chances. Back when the future looked like something worth building toward instead of just surviving. Then Claire got sick, then she died. And Mason learned that grief was a full-time job that didn't pay. He forced himself to close the laptop and stood up. The lobby felt enormous and empty. Faded paintings of mountain landscapes hung crooked on the walls. The furniture sagged. The carpet was stained beyond any hope of cleaning, but it was theirs, his and Noah's. The only home the boy had ever really known. Mason wouldn't let the bank take it without a fight, even if he was losing. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside to check the parking lot. 3 vehicles total, his beat-up truck, a rusted sedan that belonged to the older couple in room 9, and a motorcycle under a tarp that some guy had abandoned 2 months ago after skipping out on his bill. The wind hit him like a slap. Snow swirled through the yellow glow of the single working lamppost. The mountains rose black and jagged against the sky, swallowing the stars. Mason was halfway back to the office when he heard it. A sound like thunder, but wrong, sharper, closer. He turned toward the road just as headlights veered wildly through the trees, cutting white arcs through the storm. The engine roared, brakes screamed. Then the vehicle, a black SUV, expensive, way too fast for these conditions, lost the road completely. It launched off the shoulder, airborne for a sickening moment, then slammed into the hillside below the highway with a crunch of metal and shattering glass. Jesus! Mason was already running. He scrambled down the embankment, boots slipping on ice and loose rocks. The SUV had rolled twice before wedging itself against a cluster of pine trees about 30 yards below the road. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood. The driver's side was caved in. The windshield had spiderwebbed into 1,000 fractures. Mason reached the wreck and yanked on the passenger door, locked. He slammed his shoulder against it. Nothing. He kicked out what was left of the back window and climbed inside, glass crunching under his knees. The interior reeked of gasoline and something metallic. Blood. A woman was slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious, long dark hair matted with red, designer coat torn at the shoulder. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. Hey, can you hear me? No response. Mason checked for a pulse. Faint but steady. He scanned the rest of the vehicle. Expensive leather seats, a laptop bag in the back, luggage that probably cost more than his truck. No other passengers. The gasoline smell was getting stronger. All right, we're leaving. He unbuckled her seatbelt and carefully pulled her away from the wheel. She was tall, maybe 5'9", and lean. Unconscious weight was always heavier than it looked. Mason braced her against his chest and maneuvered backward through the broken window, dragging her out into the snow. He was halfway up the embankment when the SUV's engine caught fire. Flames licked out from under the hood, small at first, then blooming into something hungry and orange. Mason hauled the woman the rest of the way up to the road, his lungs burning, his shoulders screaming. He collapsed onto the frozen asphalt and laid her down as gently as he could. Below them, the fire spread fast. Within seconds, the entire vehicle was engulfed, the heat reaching them even from 30 yards away. Mason knelt beside the woman and checked her pulse again. Still there. She had a gash above her left eyebrow and bruises already darkening along her jaw. Her breathing hitched, and her eyes fluttered open, pale gray, sharp even through the pain and confusion. Don't move, Mason said. You were in an accident. I'm calling an ambulance. She grabbed his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. No. Her voice was hoarse but firm. No hospitals. You might have internal bleeding. You need no hospitals. She tried to sit up, winced, and fell back against the snow. No police. No one. Mason stared at her. Lady, you just rolled an SUV down a mountain. You're hurt. I'm not leaving you out here to freeze. Then take me somewhere else. Like where? Anywhere. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment the pain seemed to vanish behind something colder, calculating. I'll pay you. Whatever you want. Mason pulled his wrist free and sat back on his heels. The wind howled around them. The fire below roared louder. This woman was clearly running from something, or someone. And every instinct Mason had developed over the last 3 years of barely keeping his head above water told him to walk away. But he thought of Noah, of the spreadsheet full of red numbers, of the bank ready to foreclose. And he thought of Claire, who used to say that kindness didn't cost anything except the courage to give it. I've got a motel about 2 miles up the road, Mason said finally. It's not much, but it's warm. You can stay there until the storm passes and figure out your next move. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He helped her to her feet. She could barely stand. He looped her arm over his shoulders and half carried her toward his truck, which he'd left running near the motel driveway. Getting her into the passenger seat took longer than pulling her from the wreck. She kept fading in and out, mumbling things he couldn't understand. Mason drove carefully back to the motel and parked near the office. The older couple's light was off. Noah's window was dark. Good. He got the woman inside and into room 12, the one farthest from the office, where Noah wouldn't accidentally stumble into her. The room was freezing. Mason cranked the rattling heater and grabbed the extra blankets from the closet. She collapsed onto the bed, breathing hard. Blood had soaked through the sleeve of her coat. I'm going to get the first aid kit, Mason said. Don't move. Wasn't planning on it. He returned with supplies and a bowl of warm water. She'd managed to sit up, leaning against the headboard, her coat discarded on the floor. Underneath, she wore a white blouse now stained dark red along one side. I need to see that wound, Mason said. She hesitated, then unbuttoned the blouse with shaking fingers. The cut ran along her ribs. Not deep, but long and ugly. Mason cleaned it carefully, his hands steady from years of patching up everything from broken furniture to his son's scraped knees. "You should really see a doctor," he said quietly. "I told you, no hospitals." "Why?" "That's not your problem. It is if whoever you're running from shows up at my door." She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw something crack behind the ice. Fear, real and raw. "They won't," she said. "I'll be gone before anyone knows I was here." Mason didn't believe her, but he finished bandaging the wound and stepped back. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Serena." "Serena what?" "Just Serena." "All right, just Serena. I'm Mason. This is my place. You need anything? There's a phone on the desk. I'm in the office if things go sideways." "Thank you," she said again, softer this time. Mason nodded and left, locking the door behind him. He stood in the parking lot for a long moment, staring at the dark mountains and wondering what the hell he'd just dragged into his life. The next morning, Noah found her. Mason had told him to stay in the apartment while he handled some repairs, but Noah had a gift for appearing exactly where he wasn't supposed to be. The kid had inherited his mother's curiosity and his father's stubbornness, which was a dangerous combination. Mason was replacing a busted light fixture in the lobby when he heard the door to room 12 open. His heart dropped. He sprinted down the hallway and found Noah standing in the doorway, staring wide-eyed at Serena, who sat on the edge of the bed looking like she'd been hit by a truck, which, technically, she had. "Noah, who's she?" Noah asked, not taking his eyes off the stranger. Serena looked at Mason, then back at the boy. Her expression was unreadable. "My name's Serena," she said carefully. "I had an accident. Your dad's letting me stay here until I feel better." Noah studied her with the kind of blunt honesty only kids could pull off. "You look really bad." "Noah?" Mason said sharply. "It's fine," Serena said. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "He's right, I do." "Are you going to die?" Noah asked. "Not today." "That's good. My mom died. I don't want anyone else to die." The room went silent except for the heater rattling in the corner. Mason put a hand on Noah's shoulder. "Come on, buddy. Let's give Serena some space." But Serena was still looking at Noah, something shifting behind her eyes. "I'm sorry about your mom." Noah shrugged. "It was a long time ago. I don't remember her much, but Dad does. He keeps a picture by his bed." Mason's chest tightened. "Noah? Do you have kids?" Noah asked Serena. "No." "Why not?" "I don't know. I guess I never had time." "That's sad. Kids are great." Serena's smile turned real for a second. "You seem pretty great." "I am. Dad says so all the time." "I bet he does." Mason gently steered Noah out of the room. "All right, that's enough interrogation for one day. Let's let Serena rest." "Okay, bye, Serena." "Bye, Noah." Mason closed the door and walked Noah back to the apartment, his mind racing. This was already more complicated than he'd planned. Serena was supposed to stay hidden, recover quietly, and disappear. Now his son knew about her, which meant this wasn't a secret anymore. "Is she nice?" Noah asked as they reached the apartment. "I don't know yet. I think she's nice. She has sad eyes, though." "Yeah," Mason said quietly. "She does." Over the next 3 days, the storm got worse. Snow piled up against the motel walls. The highway closed. The power flickered on and off. Mason spent most of his time keeping the heating system alive and rationing their food supplies. The older couple in room 9 checked out before the roads became impassable. That left just him, Noah, and Serena. She stayed in room 12, barely moving. Mason brought her food twice a day and changed her bandages. She didn't talk much, didn't ask questions, just stared out the window at the snow and the mountains like she was waiting for something. On the 4th day, Noah showed up at her door again. Mason had been fixing a frozen pipe in the basement when he came upstairs and heard voices. He followed the sound to room 12 and found the door propped open. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, and Serena sat on the edge of the bed, holding a deck of cards. "Go fish," Noah said triumphantly, holding up a pair of 3s. Serena frowned at her hand. You're cheating. I'm 8. I don't know how to cheat. Everyone knows how to cheat. Not me. Dad says cheating is for people who are scared to lose. Serena glanced at Mason, who stood in the doorway. Your dad sounds like an optimist. He's not, Noah said cheerfully. He's just nice. Mason cleared his throat. Noah, I thought you were doing your homework. I finished. Serena needed company. She said she was bored. I didn't say that, Serena said. You looked bored. I always look like this, Noah grinned. That's sad. Mason rubbed his face. All right, kid, time to let Serena rest. Can I come back tomorrow? Serena looked at Mason, something uncertain flickering in her expression. If your dad says it's okay. Fine, Mason said, but only for an hour, and only if you finish your math first. Deal! Noah scrambled to his feet and bolted out of the room. Mason lingered in the doorway, watching Serena gather up the cards. You don't have to entertain him, Mason said. I know. He can be a lot. He's fine. She set the cards on the nightstand. Actually, he's more than fine. He's a good kid. Yeah, he is. You're doing a good job. Mason didn't know what to say to that. Compliments felt like traps lately. Thanks. Serena leaned back against the headboard, exhaustion written across her face. How long have you been running this place alone? 3 years, since my wife died. That's a long time to carry everything yourself. Didn't have much choice. There's always a choice. Not when you've got a kid depending on you. Serena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, What happened to her? Your wife. Mason hesitated. He didn't talk about Claire much. Didn't like the way people's faces changed when he did. The pity, the awkwardness, the relief that it wasn't them. But Serena didn't look like she pitied anyone. Cancer, he said finally. Started in her lungs. Spread fast. By the time they caught it, there wasn't much they could do. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. How old was Noah? 5? That's too young to lose a mother. There's no good age for it. Serena nodded slowly, like she was filing that information away. And you've been holding this place together by yourself ever since. Trying to. Doesn't look like it's going well. Mason laughed, bitter and sharp. Yeah, no kidding. Why not sell it? Start over somewhere else? Because this is home. It's all Noah's ever known. I'm not taking that from him too. Even if it's falling apart? Even then. Serena studied him with those pale gray eyes, and Mason felt like she was taking him apart piece by piece, figuring out how he worked. You're stubborn, she said. I've been told. It's going to get you killed one day. Maybe, but at least I'll go down swinging. Something almost like respect crossed her face. I believe you. And Ken. That night, Mason couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind hammer against the windows. Beside him on the nightstand was the photograph Noah had mentioned, Claire, smiling in the summer sunlight, her hair wild and her eyes bright. She looked so alive it hurt. Mason picked up the photo and traced the edge of the frame with his thumb. I don't know what I'm doing, he whispered to the empty room. I'm trying. I swear I'm trying, but I don't know if it's enough. The wind answered with a low howl. Mason set the photo down and closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd call the bank again. Tomorrow he'd fix whatever broke next. Tomorrow he'd keep pretending everything was fine for Noah's sake. Tomorrow he'd keep surviving, because that's all he knew how to do anymore. On the 5th day, the older couple from room 9 called and said they'd left a suitcase behind. Mason promised to hold it for them and went to check the room. That's when he found the laptop. It was tucked under the bed, sleek and expensive, with a silver logo he didn't recognize. Mason pulled it out and turned it over. No name, no stickers, just cold metal and a faint hum when he opened it. The screen lit up immediately. No password, no lock screen, just a desktop filled with folders labeled things like board meeting notes and acquisition files and legal, confidential. Mason's stomach sank. This wasn't the couple's laptop. This was Serena's. He should have closed it. Should have walked it straight to room 12 and handed it over without looking. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she'd showed up out of nowhere, refusing hospitals and police. Maybe it was the cold fear he'd seen flash across her face when she'd told him no one could know she was here. Mason opened one of the folders. Inside were hundreds of files, emails, spreadsheets, scanned documents. He clicked on a PDF labeled Internal Audit, December. The first page made his blood run cold. It was a report detailing financial fraud within a company called Vail Industries. Millions of dollars funneled through shell accounts, bribes paid to government officials, environmental violations covered up, and at the center of it all was a name, Serena Vail, Chief Executive Officer. Mason scrolled through page after page of evidence, emails she'd sent, memos she'd signed, orders she'd given. Everything meticulously documented, everything damning. And at the bottom of the report was a note in red text, pending federal investigation. Mason sat back, his heart pounding. Serena wasn't just running from someone. She was running from everyone. He closed the laptop and shoved it back under the bed, his hands shaking. This was bad. Worse than bad. If anyone found out he was hiding her, if the feds or whoever else was looking for her showed up here, it wouldn't just be his motel on the line. It'd be Noah. Mason stood up and walked to room 12. He knocked once, hard. "Come in," Serena said. He pushed the door open. She was sitting by the window, wrapped in blankets, staring out at the snow. She looked smaller somehow, tired. "Who are you?" Mason asked. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "I told you, Serena." "Serena Vail." Her face went still. "I found your laptop," Mason said. "I saw the files." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Serena said very quietly, "You should have left it alone." "Yeah, probably, but I didn't." Mason crossed his arms. "So now you're going to tell me the truth. All of it. Or you're gone, tonight." Serena stood up, slow and deliberate, like she was testing how much strength she had left. "You want the truth? Fine. I'm a CEO. I run a multi-billion-dollar empire, and I got greedy. I made decisions that hurt people, a lot of people, and now the federal government wants to put me in prison for the rest of my life. Are you guilty? Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does." Serena laughed, sharp and bitter. "Yes, I'm guilty. Of all of it. Every crime they're accusing me of, I did. I signed the papers, I gave the orders. I looked the other way when I should have stopped it." Mason felt something cold settle in his chest. "Then why are you running? If you're guilty, turn yourself in. Face it." "Because I'm not done yet." "Not done with what?" "Fixing it." Serena's voice was hard now, edged with something desperate. "There are people higher up than me, people who'll walk away clean if I go down alone. I have evidence that'll bury them too. But I need time to get it to the right people. And I need to stay alive long enough to testify." "So you came here?" "I didn't plan to. I was trying to get to a safe house across the state line. But the storm hit and someone ran me off the road and I crashed and you found me. Pure dumb luck." "Or dumb bad luck." "Maybe." Mason paced the small room, his mind racing. This was insane. He'd pulled a fugitive billionaire CEO out of a wrecked car and brought her into his home where his son lived. If the people hunting her showed up here, "They won't find me," Serena said, reading his face. "I was careful. No one knows where I am." "You sure about that?" "No." Mason stopped pacing and looked at her. She stood there wrapped in blankets like armor, her face pale and bruised, her eyes burning with something stubborn and unbreakable. She reminded him of himself. "If you stay," Mason said slowly, "you follow my rules. You don't leave this room unless I say so. You don't contact anyone. And if anything happens, anything, you leave. Immediately. I'm not letting my son get hurt because of your mess." "Understood." "I mean it, Serena. He's all I have. If it comes down to you or him, I'll choose him every time." "I know." She met his eyes. "And I wouldn't expect anything less." Mason nodded once and turned to leave. "Mason," he stopped. "Thank you," Serena said quietly, "for not throwing me out." "Don't thank me yet," Mason said. "This storm won't last forever, and when it breaks, you're gone." "Deal." Mason left and closed the door behind him, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He'd just made a choice that could destroy everything, but he'd also made the only choice he could live with. And for better or worse, that would have to be enough. The storm raged on for 2 more days. Mason kept himself busy with repairs and inventory and avoiding eye contact with his own reflection. Noah kept sneaking off to play cards with Serena, and Serena stayed locked in room 12, recovering slowly, her presence a constant weight pressing against the fragile walls of Mason's carefully controlled life. On the 7th day, the snow finally stopped. The sky cleared to a pale, cold blue. The highway crews started working their way up the mountain, clearing the roads inch by frozen inch. And Mason stood in the parking lot, staring at the world outside his motel, and knew that the real storm was just beginning. Because secrets like Serena Vale didn't stay buried for long. And when the truth came for them, it would come fast, and it would come hard. Mason just hoped he'd be ready. The highway reopened on a Thursday morning, and with it came the rest of the world. Mason watched from the office window as cars crawled past the motel, their headlights cutting through the gray dawn. Most didn't stop. They never did. The mountain ridge wasn't the kind of place people chose. It was where they ended up when everything else had closed for the night, or when their tank hit empty and the next town was still 40 miles away. He'd already checked room 12 twice that morning. Serena was awake, sitting by the window with her laptop open, her fingers moving across the keyboard in quick, precise bursts. She barely looked up when he knocked. "Roads are clear," Mason said from the doorway. "I know." "So you'll be leaving soon?" "Soon." She didn't stop typing. "Not yet." Mason's jaw tightened. That wasn't the deal. The deal was I'd leave when the storm broke. The storm broke. I'm still here. So I guess we're making a new deal. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were harder than he'd seen them. "I'm close, Mason. I've almost got everything I need to bury the people who tried to kill me. 2 more days and I can hand this over to someone who'll actually do something with it. And what happens to me and Noah when whoever's looking for you figures out where you've been hiding?" "They won't." "You keep saying that, but you don't know it." "You're right. I don't." Serena closed the laptop and stood, moving stiffly. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow and green, but she still looked like someone who'd gone 10 rounds and lost most of them. "But I do know that if I leave now, before I finish this, a lot of very bad people are going to walk away clean, and I can't live with that." "That's not my problem." "I know, but you let me stay anyway." She crossed her arms. "Why?" Mason didn't have a good answer for that. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't want to say it out loud. Because the truth was, somewhere between pulling her out of that wreck and watching her play go fish with his son, he'd stopped seeing her as a problem to solve and started seeing her as a person who needed help, which was exactly the kind of thinking that got people killed. 2 days, he said finally. "That's it. After that, you're gone, whether you're ready or not." Fair enough. Mason left before she could say anything else that might change his mind. He walked back across the parking lot, the morning air so cold it felt like breathing glass. The mountains stood silent and indifferent around him, their peaks still white with snow that would probably last until April. He'd lived here his whole life and still didn't understand how something so beautiful could feel so lonely. Noah was in the apartment eating cereal and watching cartoons. He looked up when Mason came in, milk dripping from his spoon. "Is Serena leaving?" he asked. "Soon. I don't want her to leave." "I know, buddy, but she's got things she needs to do." "What kind of things?" "Grown-up things." Noah made a face. "Grown-up things always sound boring." "They usually are." "Can I say goodbye before she goes?" "Yeah, of course." Noah went back to his cereal, seemingly satisfied. Mason envied how simple the world looked through an 8-year-old's eyes. People came and went. You said hello and goodbye. You didn't spend hours lying awake wondering if the choice you'd made was going to blow up in your face. Mason grabbed his coat and headed outside to salt the walkways before someone slipped and sued him for the nothing he had left. The air was sharp and clean, the kind of cold that burned your lungs if you breathed too deep. He worked methodically, his mind running through the numbers again. With the roads open, maybe he'd get a few travelers tonight. Maybe he could pull in enough to buy another week before the bank moved forward with foreclosure. Maybe. He was halfway through the parking lot when a dark blue sedan pulled in and parked near the office. A man in his 50s climbed out, wearing a heavy coat and expensive boots that had never seen real snow before today. He had the look of someone used to being listened to, broad shoulders, sharp eyes, a jaw set like he was already 3 steps ahead of whatever conversation was about to happen. Mason's gut twisted. "Help you," he called out. The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I'm looking for a friend of mine. She might have passed through here about a week ago. Tall, dark hair, probably hurt. Driving a black SUV. Mason kept his face neutral. "Haven't seen anyone like that." "You sure? It would have been during the storm. Maybe she needed a place to stay." "I'm sure. We only had one guest that week, and it was an older couple. They checked out days ago." The man studied him for a long moment, like he was trying to decide whether Mason was lying or just stupid. "Mind if I take a look around? You got a warrant?" "I'm not a cop." "Then, yeah, I mind." The man's smile thinned. "I'm just trying to find my friend, make sure she's safe. And I'm just trying to run my business without strangers poking around. So unless you need a room, we're done here." For a second, Mason thought the man might push it. His hand drifted toward his coat pocket, and Mason's heart kicked into overdrive. But then the man just nodded slowly and pulled out a business card instead. "If you do see her, give me a call. There's a reward for information, $10,000. He held out the card. Mason took it, glanced at the name, David Frost, private security consultant, and shoved it in his pocket without another word. Frost climbed back into his sedan and drove off, slow and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. Mason waited until the car disappeared down the highway before he moved. Then he sprinted to room 12 and pounded on the door. "It's me! Open up!" Serena opened the door, already pale. "What happened?" "Someone was just here looking for you. A guy named David Frost said he's private security." "Frost?" Serena's face went white. "He's not security. He's a fixer. The people I'm trying to expose sent him. He said there's a $10,000 reward for information. There's probably 10 times that if he finds me alive, and 20 times that if he doesn't." She grabbed her laptop and started shoving things into a bag. "I need to leave, now." "Where are you going to go?" "Your car's at the bottom of a ravine." "I'll figure it out." "Like hell you will. You can barely walk without wincing." Serena stopped and looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely scared. "Mason, if Frost knows I'm here, more people will come, and they won't be polite. You need to get Noah and leave. This is my home. It's 4 walls and a roof. It's not worth dying for," says the woman who won't walk away from a laptop full of evidence. "That's different." "How?" "Because what I'm doing matters. And what I'm doing doesn't?" They stared at each other, both breathing hard, the space between them electric with fear and frustration, and something neither of them wanted to name. Finally, Serena said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that." "Yeah, you did." Mason ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I get it. You've got your mission or whatever, but I've got a kid who needs me. So here's what's going to happen. You're staying in this room. You're not leaving. You're not answering the door. And if anyone asks, I've never seen you. Understand?" "Mason, that's the deal. Take it or leave." Serena looked like she wanted to argue. Then she just nodded. "Okay. Okay?" Mason left and locked the door behind him, his hand shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in. He walked back to the apartment and found Noah still watching cartoons, completely oblivious to the fact that their world had just tilted sideways. "Hey, buddy, how do you feel about a road trip?" Noah looked up, confused. "Like, now?" "Maybe. I don't know yet. Just thought it might be fun to visit Grandma for a few days." "But you always say Grandma's house smells like wet towels and sadness." Mason couldn't help it. He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Yeah, I did say that." "So why would we go?" "Forget it. Bad idea." Noah shrugged and went back to his show. Mason stood there feeling useless and afraid, which had become his default state over the last 3 years. He thought about calling the police. Thought about telling them everything and washing his hands of Serena Vale and her corporate warfare and the dangerous men who wanted her dead. But then he thought about the way she'd looked at Noah when the kid had asked if she was going to die, the way she'd smiled when Noah had called her sad, the way she'd said thank you like she'd forgotten people could be kind without wanting something in return. Mason had spent 3 years surviving. Maybe it was time to try living instead, even if it killed him. The rest of the day crawled by in tense silence. Mason kept himself busy with repairs, a leaking pipe in room 6, A broken lock on the supply closet, a crack in the front window that he covered with duct tape because glass was expensive and money was something he didn't have. Every time a car slowed near the motel, his heart hammered against his ribs. Every time the phone rang, he expected Frost's voice on the other end. But nothing happened. By evening, Noah had gotten restless. He kept asking if he could go see Serena, and Mason kept finding reasons to say no. Finally, around 6, the kid wore him down. Fine. 10 minutes. And you don't tell her about Frost. Why not? Because she's already worried enough. About what? Just 10 minutes, Noah. That's it. Noah bolted out the door before Mason could change his mind. Mason followed at a distance, watching as his son knocked on room 12 and waited. Serena opened the door, looking surprised. Hey, Noah. Can I come in? I don't know if that's a good idea right now. Please? I'm bored, and Dad said I could. Serena glanced at Mason, who stood a few feet away with his hands shoved in his pockets. He nodded once. She stepped aside and let Noah in. Mason lingered outside, close enough to hear, but not close enough to intrude. Through the half-open door, he could see Noah plop down on the bed while Serena sat in the chair by the window. What are you working on? Noah asked, pointing at the laptop. Just some stuff for work. What kind of work do you do? I run a company. Or I did. It's complicated. My dad says everything's complicated when grown-ups don't want to explain it. Serena smiled faintly. Your dad's a smart guy. Yeah, he's the best. Noah picked at a loose thread on the bedspread. Are you in trouble? Serena hesitated. What makes you think that? Because you're hiding, and people only hide when they're in trouble or playing hide and seek, and you don't seem like you're playing. You're right. I'm not playing. So you're in trouble. Yeah, I am. What did you do? I made some bad choices, and now I'm trying to fix them. Noah thought about that for a moment. My mom used to say that mistakes don't make you bad. They just make you human. Serena's expression cracked, just for a second. Your mom sounds like she was a good person. She was. I don't remember her much, but Dad talks about her sometimes. He gets sad when he does, but I think it helps him too. Like remembering hurts, but forgetting would hurt worse. That's a very wise thing to say. I'm wise for my age. Dad says so. I believe him. Noah looked at her seriously. Are the people after you going to hurt you? They might try. Then you should stay here. My dad won't let anyone hurt you. He's really strong and really stubborn. He never gives up on anything. I've noticed. So you'll stay? Serena glanced toward the door where Mason stood listening, and their eyes met. Something passed between them, an understanding maybe, or a question that neither of them knew how to answer yet. I'll stay as long as I can, Serena said quietly. But Noah, you need to understand something. The people looking for me are dangerous. And if they find me here, they might hurt your dad. Or you. I can't let that happen. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. You should ask my dad. He always knows what to do. Does he? Yeah, even when he's scared, he figures it out. Mason cleared his throat and stepped into the doorway. All right, buddy, time's up. Let's give Serena some space. Noah hopped off the bed. Okay, bye, Serena. Bye, Noah. The kid ran past Mason and headed back toward the apartment. Mason stayed in the doorway looking at Serena. He thinks I always know what to do, Mason said. Do you? Not even close. Could have fooled me. I'm good at faking it. Serena stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening mountains. He's a good kid, Mason. You've done an incredible job with him. I've done what I could. It never feels like enough. It never does. She turned to face him. But he's happy. He's kind. He's not afraid to care about people. That doesn't happen by accident. Mason didn't know what to say to that. Compliments still felt like traps. Things people said when they wanted something or when they were trying to soften bad news. Frost is going to come back, Serena said. You know that, right? Yeah. And when he does, he won't be alone. I know. So why are you still here? Why haven't you kicked me out? Mason leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion settling into his bones like it had taken up permanent residence. Because I'm tired, Serena. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of barely holding things together. I'm tired of watching my son grow up in a place that's falling apart and not being able to do anything about it. And for the first time in 3 years, something feels like it matters beyond just making it through another day. And that something is helping me? Maybe. Or maybe it's just choosing to do something instead of letting life happen to me. Serena crossed the room until she was standing right in front of him, close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the fear she was trying so hard to hide, the vulnerability she'd probably spent her whole life learning to bury. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone who'd turn me in for the reward? Someone who'd look at me and see dollar signs? Someone like everyone else I've ever known. And instead you got a broke motel owner who can barely keep the lights on." "Yeah, and it's the best thing that's happened to me in years." Mason's breath caught. They were standing too close. He should step back, should put distance between them before whatever this was became something neither of them could take back. But he didn't move, and neither did she. "Mason!" A car door slammed outside. They both froze. Mason moved to the window and looked out. A black SUV had pulled into the parking lot. Not the same one Serena had crashed. This one was newer, cleaner, and far more intimidating. Two men climbed out, both wearing dark suits and expressions that said they weren't here to rent a room. "Stay here," Mason said. "Don't make a sound." Mason waits, but he was already gone, pulling the door shut behind him and walking across the parking lot with his heart trying to claw its way out of his chest. The two men turned as he approached. One was tall and thin with wire-frame glasses. The other was built like a concrete wall and had a scar running down the left side of his face. "Help you, gentlemen?" Mason asked, keeping his voice steady. The tall one smiled. "We're looking for someone, a woman. Dark hair, late 30s, probably injured. We have reason to believe she might be staying here." "Sorry, haven't seen anyone like that." "You sure about that?" The tall man pulled out his phone and showed Mason a photo. It was Serena, professionally dressed, standing in front of a corporate logo Mason didn't recognize. She looked cold in the photo, untouchable. Nothing like the woman who'd played cards with his son. "Nope, never seen her." The scarred man stepped forward. "We could make it worth your while, $20,000 for information leading to her location. Like I said, I haven't seen her. Maybe you'd like to think about it, sleep on it." "I've already thought about it. The answer's no." The tall man's smile disappeared. "You don't want to make this difficult, and you don't want to threaten me on my own property." Mason crossed his arms. "So here's how this is going to work. You're going to get back in your car and leave. And if you come back, I'm calling the police and telling them about the gun your friend's trying to hide under his jacket." The scarred man's hand moved slightly, confirming Mason's guess. He didn't actually know if the man was armed, but the odds were good enough to bet on. The two men exchanged a look. Then the tall one nodded slowly. "We'll be back," he said. "And next time, we won't be asking nicely." They climbed back into the SUV and drove off, kicking up gravel as they went. Mason stood there until the taillights disappeared, then walked back to room 12 on legs that felt like they might give out any second. Serena was standing by the door when he came in. "You need to leave," Mason said. "Tonight. Right now." "I know. I mean it, Serena. Those guys weren't playing around, and when they come back, and they will come back, it's going to get ugly." "I know," she said again, "but I don't have anywhere to go, Mason. My contacts are compromised. My safe houses are blown. The only people I can trust are halfway across the country, and I don't have a car or money or anything except this laptop and the hope that what's on it will be enough to bring these people down." "Then let me help you." "You've already done enough." "Clearly not, or you wouldn't still be here." Serena sat down on the bed, her shoulders sagging. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked defeated. "Why are you doing this, Mason? Why do you care what happens to me?" "Because somebody should. And because Noah's right. I don't give up on things. Even when I probably should." "You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe. But at least I'll go down trying to do the right thing instead of just surviving another day." Serena looked up at him, and something in her expression shifted. The ice cracked a little wider, and underneath it was something raw and real and terrified. "I don't know how to let people help me," she said quietly. "I've spent my whole life building walls and pushing people away and convincing myself that needing anyone was a weakness. And now I'm here. And you're offering to risk everything for a stranger who's done nothing but bring danger to your door, and I don't understand why." Mason sat down beside her on the bed. Because 3 years ago, my wife died, and I spent every day after that wishing someone had been there to help us when we needed it. Wishing someone had seen how badly we were drowning and thrown us a rope. And now I've got a chance to be that person for someone else. So yeah, it's dangerous, and yeah, it's probably stupid, but I'm doing it anyway. Serena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. What if I can't fix this? What if I testify and nothing changes and all of this was for nothing? Then at least you tried. That's more than most people can say. She laughed, bitter and broken. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? They sat there in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on them like the mountain snow pressing down on the roof. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Finally, Serena said, Okay. Okay, what? Okay, I'll let you help me, but on one condition. What's that? If things go bad, if Frost or those men or anyone else shows up and it looks like someone's going to get hurt, you take Noah and you run. You don't look back. You don't try to save me. You just run. Serena? That's the condition, Mason. Take it or I leave tonight and you never see me again. He wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her that he wasn't the kind of man who ran when things got hard. But he looked into her eyes and saw that she meant it. That this was the only way she could accept his help without the guilt eating her alive. Fine, he said, but I'm not going to need to, because we're going to figure this out. You sound pretty sure about that. I'm not, but I'm good at faking it. Serena smiled, really smiled, and for a moment the fear and exhaustion and years of emotional armor fell away, and Mason saw the person she might have been if life had been kinder. Thank you, she said. Stop thanking me. Why? Because you're starting to sound like you don't believe you deserve help. And that's the saddest thing I've heard all week. Serena's smile faded, but something softer took its place. She reached out and put her hand on his, and this time when she touched him, it didn't feel uncertain or transactional. It felt real. Mason stood up before he could do something stupid like lean in and kiss her, because that's where this was heading, and he wasn't ready for it. Wasn't ready to let someone new into the broken parts of his life. Get some rest, he said. We'll figure out the next step in the morning. Mason? He stopped at the door. For what it's worth, Serena said quietly, I think your wife would be proud of you. For what you've done with Noah. For what you're doing now. For not giving up. Mason's throat tightened. Yeah, maybe. He left before his voice could break. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. His mind kept replaying the conversation with Serena, the fear in her eyes, the way her hand had felt against his. He thought about Claire and what she would say if she were here. She'd probably tell him he was being an idiot, that he was risking too much for someone he barely knew. But she'd also tell him that kindness was never wasted, that helping people mattered, even when it cost you something, maybe especially then. Mason closed his eyes and made a promise to the darkness. He was going to protect Serena. He was going to protect Noah. And somehow, some way, he was going to make sure they all came out of this alive, even if he had no idea how. The next morning came too fast and not fast enough. Mason had maybe slept 2 hours, his dreams full of black SUVs and men with guns, and Noah's voice calling for him through smoke he couldn't see through. He gave up trying around 5 and made coffee that tasted like burnt dirt, standing at the kitchen window watching the sun struggle to break through the clouds. The motel looked tired in the early light, peeling paint, sagging gutters, windows that hadn't been washed in months. It was falling apart, just like everything else in his life, and he was running out of duct tape and prayers to hold it together. Noah stumbled out of his bedroom around 6:30, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early," Mason said. "Couldn't sleep, had weird dreams." "Yeah, me too." They ate breakfast in silence, toaster waffles and orange juice that was mostly water. Mason kept glancing at his phone, half expecting it to ring with bad news, but it just sat there on the counter, quiet and useless. "Is Serena okay?" Noah asked suddenly. "Why wouldn't she be?" "I don't know. You seem worried." Mason forced a smile. "I'm always worried. It's kind of my thing." "You worry too much." "Probably." Noah finished his waffle and carried his plate to the sink. "Can I go see her later?" "We'll see." "That means no." "It means we'll see." Noah made a face but didn't push it. He knew when his dad was in one of those moods where arguing would just make things worse. The kid had gotten good at reading people, which was both impressive and heartbreaking for an 8-year-old. Around 8, Mason walked across the parking lot to room 12. He knocked twice and waited. Serena opened the door looking like she'd slept about as well as he had, which was to say, not at all. "Morning," she said. "Morning. You eat anything?" "Not hungry?" "You need to eat." "I need to finish this." She gestured at the laptop on the desk, which was surrounded by papers covered in notes and printouts. "I'm almost done. Another day, maybe 2, and I'll have everything I need." Mason stepped inside and closed the door. "And then what?" "Then I reach out to the one person I trust in the federal prosecutor's office. Someone Frost and his people don't know about. I hand over the evidence, and I disappear until the trial." Just like that. Just like that. "And you think it'll work?" Serena sat down at the desk, her shoulders tight with tension. "I think it's the only option I have left. These people, the ones I'm exposing, they've got lawyers and money and connections everywhere. The only way to bring them down is with evidence so damning they can't weasel out of it. And that's what I've been building." Mason pulled a chair over and sat across from her. "What did you do, Serena? I know you said you're guilty, but what exactly are we talking about here?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. Then she said, "My company, Vale Industries, manufactures industrial equipment, machinery for construction, mining, that kind of thing. 5 years ago, we developed a new line of excavators that were supposed to be safer and more efficient than anything on the market. But during testing, we found a flaw, a design defect that could cause catastrophic failure under certain conditions." "How catastrophic?" "People could die." Mason's stomach turned. "So you recalled them?" "No, I didn't." Serena's voice was flat, stripped of everything except honesty. "I buried the reports. I pressured the engineers to sign off anyway. And I pushed the product to market because we'd already invested $200 million into development, and I couldn't afford to take the loss." "How many people got hurt?" 17 injuries, 3 deaths, all at different job sites across the country, all preventable." Mason sat back feeling sick. "And you covered it up." "I paid settlements, made the families sign NDAs, blamed operator error. I did everything I could to make it go away." She finally looked at him, and there was no ice in her eyes now, just guilt and shame and something that looked like self-loathing. "That's who I am, Mason. That's what I did. I chose profit over people, and 3 human beings are dead because of it. So why are you doing this now? Why expose yourself?" "Because 6 months ago, I found out the executives above me knew about the defect too. They knew before I did, and they buried it deeper. And when the accidents started happening, they didn't just cover them up. They falsified safety reports to keep selling the equipment. Hundreds more units went out. And if someone doesn't stop it, more people are going to die. So this is about stopping them. This is about making sure I'm not the only one who goes down for it." Serena's jaw tightened. "I'm guilty. I know that. I'll pay for what I did, but I'm not letting the people who started this whole thing walk away clean while I take all the blame." Mason didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to walk out and never look back. Wanted to grab Noah and run as far from Serena Vale and her corporate nightmare as he could get. But another part, the part that had kept him going for the last 3 years, understood what it meant to make a choice you couldn't take back and then have to live with it forever. "You could have just disappeared," he said finally. "Taken your money and vanished." "Why didn't you?" "Because I can't live with myself if I don't try to fix this. And because—" She stopped, her voice catching. "Because, for the first time in my life, I met someone who looked at me like I was worth saving, and I don't want to be the person who proves him wrong." Mason's chest tightened. "Noah." "Yeah, Noah." Serena smiled sadly. "That kid has more faith in people than anyone I've ever met, and I don't want to be another reason he stops believing the world can be good." They sat there in the quiet of room 12, the laptop humming softly on the desk, the mountains pressing in from all sides. Mason thought about Claire and how she used to say that people weren't defined by their worst mistakes. They were defined by what they did after. "All right," he said. "Finish what you need to finish. But you do it fast, and you do it here. No leaving, no taking chances. And when you're ready, I'll help you get this evidence to whoever needs to see it." "Mason, I'm not arguing about this. That's the deal." Serena looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Mason stood to leave, but Serena's voice stopped him. Thank you, she said quietly, for not hating me. I don't hate you, I just wish you'd made different choices. Yeah, me too. He left her there and walked back across the lot, the weight of everything pressing down on him like he was trying to carry the whole mountain on his shoulders. The day dragged on in tense, fragile hours. Mason kept himself busy, checking in a couple who looked like they were running from something too, fixing a busted heater in room 4, replacing a light bulb that had burned out in the hallway. Normal tasks that felt surreal given everything else happening around him. Noah spent most of the morning doing schoolwork, but by afternoon he was restless and bored. Mason tried to keep him occupied with a movie, but the kid kept asking about Serena. Can I just say hi, please? Not right now, buddy. Why not? Because she's busy. Doing what? Work stuff. That's boring. Yeah, well, being a grown-up is mostly boring. Noah flopped onto the couch dramatically. I'm bored. I noticed. Can we go into town? Not today. Why not? Because I said so. Noah gave him a look that was pure Claire, eyebrows raised, mouth set in a line that said he wasn't buying it. Mason had to look away before the resemblance hurt too much. Fine, Noah said, but you owe me ice cream later. Deal. Around 3 in the afternoon, Mason's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, and his gut immediately clenched. He stepped outside before answering. Hello? Mr. Reed? The voice was smooth, professional, male. My name is David Frost. I believe we've already met. Mason's blood went cold. What do you want? I want to have a conversation, a civil one. I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. I don't have anything to say to you. I think you do, and I think it would be in your best interest to hear me out. I'm hanging up now. I know Serena Vale is at your motel, Mr. Reed. I know she's been there for over a week, and I know you've been hiding her. Mason's heart hammered against his ribs. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, and lying about it is only going to make things worse for you and your son. Frost paused, letting that sink in. Noah, right? 8 years old? Goes to Mountain View Elementary? Rage flooded through Mason so fast he could barely see straight. You stay away from my son. I don't want to go anywhere near him. That's the point. You give me Serena, and I walk away. You never see me again. Your boy stays safe. Everyone wins. Except Serena. Serena made her choices. Now she has to face the consequences. And what happens to her if I hand her over? That's not your concern. Yeah, it is. Because if I do what you're asking, I become part of whatever happens next. So tell me, what happens to her? Frost was quiet for a moment. Then he said, she disappears. Quietly. Permanently. No one gets hurt except the person who deserves it. You mean you kill her? I mean problems get solved, one way or another. Mason's hand tightened on the phone. Go to hell. Mr. Reed, you come near my motel again, I'm calling the cops. You come near my son, I'll kill you myself. We clear? Crystal. But you should know something before you make this harder than it needs to be. Frost's voice dropped, losing the professional polish. I'm not the only one looking for her, and the people coming after me won't be nearly as patient. So you've got about 48 hours before the situation gets out of your control. Think about that. The line went dead. Mason stood there shaking, the phone still pressed to his ear. He wanted to punch something, wanted to scream, wanted to grab Noah and run like Serena had told him to. But he didn't. Instead, he walked back inside, locked the door, and went to find his son. Noah was lying on the floor coloring in a dinosaur book. He looked up when Mason came in. You okay, Dad? You look weird. I'm fine. Just got a phone call that annoyed me. From who? Nobody important. Mason crouched down beside him. Hey, buddy, I need you to do me a favor. What kind of favor? I need you to stay inside for the next couple days. No going outside without me. No wandering off, okay? Noah's face scrunched up with confusion. Why? Because I said so. That's not a real reason. Mason sighed. The kid was too smart for his own good. Because there are some people around who might not be very nice, and I want to make sure you're safe. What kind of people? Just people. It's complicated. Does it have to do with Serena? Why would you think that? Because you've been acting weird ever since she got here, and you keep checking on her, and you won't let me see her as much. Noah put down his crayon. Is she in trouble? Mason sat down on the floor beside him. Yeah, she is. Are you helping her? I'm trying to. Good. She needs help. She's sad and scared and trying to be brave, but I can tell. Noah picked up a blue crayon and started coloring again. You're good at helping people, Dad. You'll figure it out. Mason put his arm around his son and pulled him close. I hope you're right. That evening, Mason brought dinner to room 12. Leftover spaghetti that was more sauce than noodles, and garlic bread that was mostly butter. Serena ate mechanically, her eyes never leaving the laptop screen. How much longer? Mason asked. Few more hours, maybe less. I'm encrypting everything and setting up a secure transfer protocol. Once it's ready, I send it to my contact and it's done. And then you leave. And then I leave. She looked at him. Frost called you, didn't he? Mason didn't bother asking how she knew. Yeah. What did he say? He knows you're here. He knows about Noah. And he gave me 48 hours to hand you over before things get worse. Serena set down her fork, her face pale. You need to take Noah and leave. Tonight. We've been over this. That was before Frost threatened your son, Mason. This isn't a game anymore. If he knows about Noah, he'll use him to get to you. And I won't let that happen. So what do you want me to do? Just pack up and run? Leave you here to deal with Frost and whoever else shows up? Yes, exactly that. Not happening. Why are you so stubborn? Because someone has to be. Mason leaned against the desk. Look, I get that you're scared. I'm scared too. But running doesn't solve anything. It just delays the inevitable. So we're staying. We're finishing this. And then we all walk away alive. You don't know that. No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway. Serena stared at him, and something in her expression cracked wide open. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. I've done terrible things. I've brought nothing but danger to your door, so why are you still here? Mason thought about that for a long moment. Then he said, Because 3 years ago, my wife was dying, and I was drowning, and nobody came. Nobody helped. Nobody even noticed. And I swore that if I ever had the chance to be the person who showed up for someone else, I would, no matter what it cost. Even if it cost you everything, even then. Serena stood and crossed the room until she was standing right in front of him, close enough that he could see the exhaustion etched into every line of her face, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, she said quietly, or the most foolish. Probably both. She smiled, sad and broken and real. Then she did something that surprised them both. She kissed him. It wasn't gentle or romantic or any of the things kisses were supposed to be in movies. It was desperate and messy and tasted like fear and gratitude and 3 years of loneliness that neither of them had known how to name. Mason kissed her back, his hands finding her waist, pulling her closer. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The danger, the debt, the weight of the world pressing down on them. For a moment, it was just two broken people trying to remember what it felt like to connect with someone who understood what it meant to carry too much for too long. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I'm sorry, Serena whispered. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. But, Serena, don't. She nodded, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. Okay. Mason stepped back, putting distance between them before he did something even more reckless. Finish your work. I'll check on you in a few hours. He left before she could say anything else, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of tension and waiting. Serena worked late into the night, the glow of her laptop the only light in room 12. Mason checked on her every few hours, bringing food she didn't eat and coffee she drank too fast. They didn't talk about the kiss, didn't acknowledge what had happened between them. They just existed in the same fragile space, both afraid to push too hard or pull too far away. Noah asked about Serena constantly, and Mason kept making excuses. The kid was smart enough to know something was wrong, but young enough not to push for answers he wouldn't understand. On the second night, around midnight, Serena knocked on Mason's door. He opened it to find her standing there with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and her face set with determination. "It's done," she said. "I sent everything to my contact an hour ago." She confirmed receipt. "The evidence is out there now. It's real." Mason felt something loosen in his chest. "So it's over?" "Not yet. She needs time to review everything and present it to the right people. Could be days, could be weeks. But it started." Serena looked past him into the apartment. "I should go, tonight, before Frost's deadline runs out." "Where will you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere they won't think to look." "That's not a plan." "It's all I've got." Mason stepped outside and closed the door behind him so they wouldn't wake Noah. "You can't just run blindly. You need a destination, a safe place." "I had safe places. They're all compromised now." "Then we make a new one." "We?" Mason ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion and adrenaline making him say things he probably shouldn't. "I've got a friend, guy I served with back when I did 2 years in the National Guard. He owns a cabin about 3 hours north of here, deep in the woods. No roads in. You have to hike the last 2 miles. He lets me use it sometimes when I need to get away." "Mason, you stay there until the trial. I'll bring you supplies, check on you, make sure you're okay." "That's insane." "Yeah, but it's better than you wandering around hoping you don't get caught." Serena looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Why would you do that? Why would you risk more than you already have?" "Because I started this, and I'm going to see it through." "You didn't start anything. I crashed my car. You just happened to be there. And I chose to help, so now we're in this together." They stared at each other in the cold night air, their breath coming out in white clouds. The mountains loomed around them, silent witnesses to every terrible decision they'd made that had led them to this moment. "Okay," Serena said finally. "But I need to leave tonight, right now, before Frost's deadline hits." "I'll drive you." "What about Noah?" "He's asleep. I'll wake him up and bring him along. It'll be fine." Mason, but he was already moving, going back inside to wake his son and pack a bag and try to figure out how to explain to an 8-year-old why they were leaving in the middle of the night. Noah woke up confused and groggy. "Where are we going?" he mumbled. "On an adventure." "At midnight?" "Best time for adventures." Noah was too tired to argue. Mason bundled him into his coat and shoes, grabbed a bag with clothes and snacks, and carried him out to the truck. Serena was already waiting by the passenger door, her face pale in the dim light. They drove north in silence, the highway empty and dark. Noah fell back asleep in the back seat, his head resting against the window. Mason kept his eyes on the road, hyper-aware of every car that passed them, every set of headlights in his rearview mirror. "Thank you," Serena said quietly after about an hour. "Stop thanking me. I mean it, for everything, for saving me, for keeping me safe, for not giving up on me when you should have." "I don't give up on people. I know, it's one of the things She stopped herself. "It's a good quality." Mason glanced at her. "What were you going to say?" "Nothing. Doesn't matter." "Serena." She turned to look at him, and in the glow of the dashboard lights, her face was softer than he'd ever seen it, vulnerable, open. "I was going to say it's one of the things I love about you," she said quietly, "but that's crazy. We barely know each other, and I'm leaving, and you're going back to your life, so it doesn't matter." Mason's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His heart was doing something complicated and painful in his chest, and he didn't know how to make it stop. "Yeah," he said finally, "it doesn't matter." But they both knew it did. They reached the trailhead around 3 in the morning. Mason woke Noah gently and helped him out of the truck. The kid was still half asleep, stumbling along beside him as they started up the dark trail with flashlights cutting thin beams through the trees. The hike took 40 minutes, most of it uphill. Noah complained once, quietly, and then went silent when he realized how serious his dad looked. Serena followed behind them, carrying her laptop bag and a backpack Mason had given her with supplies. The cabin appeared suddenly through the trees, a small, weathered structure that looked like it had been there since before the mountains were named. Mason unlocked the door and ushered them inside. It smelled like dust and old wood and memories of simpler times. "It's not much," Mason said, flipping on a battery-powered lantern. "But it's safe, and it's off the grid. No one knows about this place except me and the guy who owns it." Serena set down her bag and looked around. One room, a wood stove, a cot in the corner, shelves with canned food and bottled water. Basic, isolated, perfect. "How long do I stay here?" she asked. "Until I hear from you that it's safe, or until someone comes to take you into protective custody for the trial. And you'll check on me. Once a week, maybe more if I can manage it." Noah had collapsed onto the cot, already asleep again. Mason covered him with a blanket and turned back to Serena. "You should get some rest too. We'll head back in a few hours." "Mason." Serena crossed the small space until she was standing in front of him. "I don't know how to say goodbye to you." "Then don't. This isn't goodbye, it's just see you later." "What if it's not? What if something happens and—" Mason put his hands on her shoulders, cutting her off. "Nothing's going to happen. You're going to stay here. You're going to stay safe. And when this is all over, you're going to walk into that courtroom and burn down everyone who deserves it. Understand?" Serena nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I'm scared." "I know. But you're also the strongest person I've ever met. And you're going to get through this." She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his chest, and Mason wrapped his arms around her, holding her while she cried silently into his shirt. They stood like that for a long time, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and somehow made each other braver. When Serena finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "Take care of Noah," she said. "Always. And take care of yourself." "I'll try." She smiled sadly. "Liar." Mason kissed her forehead, gentle and brief, and then stepped back before he changed his mind about leaving. "I'll be back in a week. Maybe sooner. I'll be here." He woke Noah and carried him back down the trail, the boy's arms wrapped around his neck, his breath warm against Mason's shoulder. At the truck, Mason looked back one last time, but the cabin had already disappeared into the darkness. The drive home was quiet. Noah woke up halfway and asked where Serena was. "She's somewhere safe," Mason said. "Is she coming back?" "I don't know, buddy. I hope she does. I like her." "Yeah, me too." They got back to the motel just as the sun was rising. Mason carried Noah inside and put him to bed, then stood at the window watching the mountains turn gold in the early light. He'd done what he could. He'd kept Serena safe. He'd gotten her evidence to the right people. Now all he could do was wait and hope it was enough. 3 days passed like held breath. Mason went through the motions of running the motel, checking in guests who barely looked at him, fixing things that had been broken for months, trying to pretend everything was normal when nothing felt normal anymore. Noah kept asking when Serena was coming back, and Mason kept giving answers that weren't really answers. "Soon, buddy." "But when?" "I don't know. When things are safer." "Safer from what?" "Just safer." The kid didn't buy it, but he stopped asking. That was somehow worse. On the 4th day, Frost showed up again. Mason was replacing a broken hinge on the door to room 3 when the dark blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. His stomach dropped. He set down his tools and walked over slowly, keeping his hands visible, his face neutral. Frost climbed out alone this time. No scarred partner. No backup that Mason could see. Just the man himself, wearing that same expensive coat and those same boots that had never known real work. "Mr. Reed," Frost said pleasantly. "Beautiful morning, isn't it? What do you want?" "Just checking in. My deadline passed. You didn't call. I'm curious why." "Because I don't have anything to tell you." "Really?" Frost smiled. "Because my sources tell me that a certain woman matching Serena Vale's description was seen leaving your motel 3 nights ago, around midnight, accompanied by you and a small child." Mason's blood went cold, but he kept his face blank. "Your sources are wrong." "Are they?" "Because I've got surveillance footage from a gas station 15 miles north of here showing your truck passing through around 1:30 in the morning. Interesting time for a drive with your son, don't you think?" "We went camping." "In the middle of winter? In the middle of the night?" Noah couldn't sleep, thought some fresh air would help. Frost studied him, and Mason could see the man doing calculations behind those sharp eyes, weighing probabilities, measuring risks. "You're lying," Frost said finally. "And we both know it. But here's what I can't figure out. Why? What's she offering you? Money?" Because I can triple whatever it is. Protection? I can provide that too. So what is it, Mr. Reed? What makes a broke single father risk everything for a woman he barely knows? Maybe I just don't like bullies. I'm not a bully. I'm a professional doing a job. Yeah? What job is that? Murdering people who embarrass your bosses? Frost's smile disappeared. You're in over your head, and you're dragging your son down with you. Is that really what you want? What I want is for you to get off my property and never come back. That's not going to happen, not until I find her. Then I guess we're done here. Mason turned to walk away, but Frost's voice stopped him. I know about the cabin. Mason froze. Took some digging, Frost continued, almost conversational. But I found your military records, found your friend who owns property in the National Forest, found the deed, found the coordinates. He paused. Want to guess where I'm heading next? Mason spun around, rage flooding through him so fast he could barely see. You stay away from there. Then tell me where she is. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. And if you don't tell me right now, I'm going up to that cabin and whatever I find there is on you. Mason's hands curled into fists. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to swing, to knock Frost down and keep hitting until the threat was gone. But he couldn't, because Frost wasn't alone. He was never alone. And if Mason touched him, more people would come, people who wouldn't bother with conversations. She's not there, Mason said through gritted teeth. Then you won't mind if I check. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. By the time they get here, I'll be gone. And by the time they figure out where I went, it'll be too late. Frost climbed back into his sedan and drove off, slow and deliberate, heading north. Mason stood there for 3 seconds before he ran. He sprinted to the apartment, threw open the door, and found Noah playing on the floor. Pack a bag, Mason said, right now. Noah looked up, startled. Why? We're going on another trip. Where? Just pack. Clothes, your toothbrush, your book. 5 minutes. The urgency in Mason's voice got through. Noah scrambled to his feet and ran to his room. Mason grabbed his keys, his phone, and the emergency cash he kept hidden in the coffee can under the sink. He called the cabin's emergency line, a satellite phone he'd left with Serena in case she needed to reach him. It rang 6 times before she picked up. Mason? Frost knows where you are. He's on his way there right now. You need to leave. What? How? Doesn't matter. Just go. Now. Head deeper into the woods. I'll find you, but you need to move. Mason, I can't just… Serena, go. He hung up before she could argue. Noah appeared with his backpack, eyes wide with fear. What's happening, Dad? Remember Serena, the woman we took to the cabin? Yeah. She's in trouble, and we need to help her. Okay. No questions, no complaints, just trust. Mason grabbed his son's hand and they ran to the truck. The drive north took 90 minutes of Mason breaking every speed limit and praying no cops were watching. Noah sat in the passenger seat, gripping his backpack, watching his father with worry written all across his small face. Is Serena going to be okay? He asked quietly. I'm going to make sure she is. What if the bad people get there first? They won't. How do you know? Because I'm not going to let them. Mason's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered it anyway. Mr. Reed? It was Frost, and he sounded pleased. I'm at the cabin. It's empty, but there are fresh tracks in the snow leading east. Looks like someone left in a hurry. Leave her alone. Can't do that. But I'll make you a deal. You tell me which direction she went, and I'll make it quick. She won't suffer. Go to hell. She's going to die either way, Mason. At least this way it's clean, painless. The alternative is much worse. Mason's hand tightened on the phone. If you touch her, I'll kill you. No, you won't. You're a good man. Good men don't kill people. They make threats they can't keep and hope that's enough. Frost paused. I'll find her with or without your help. But if you help, maybe I'll forget about you and the boy. Maybe you get to walk away from this. I'm not helping you. Then you're choosing her over your son. Hope you can live with that. The line went dead. Mason threw the phone onto the dashboard and pushed the accelerator harder. The truck shuddered, the engine whined, but they kept moving. They reached the trailhead 40 minutes later. Mason parked and grabbed his backpack, water, flashlight, first aid kit, and the hunting knife he'd owned since he was 18 and had never once used on anything except rope. "Stay in the truck," he told Noah. "Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone except me." "I want to come with you." "No." "But, Noah." Mason crouched down and gripped his son's shoulders. "I need you to be brave right now. Can you do that for me?" Noah's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "Good. If I'm not back in 2 hours, you drive to the ranger station 5 miles south of here. Tell them your dad is in the woods and he needs help, okay?" "I don't know how to drive." "You've watched me 100 times. You'll figure it out." "Dad, I'm scared." "I know, buddy. Me too." Mason pulled him into a tight hug. "But I'm coming back, I promise." He left before Noah could see him cry. The trail was steep and icy, and Mason moved as fast as he dared without falling. His breath came in ragged gasps. His legs burned. But he kept going, following the path he'd walked dozens of times, every landmark familiar even in his panic. He reached the cabin 15 minutes later and found it just like Frost had said. Empty, door hanging open, snow tracked through the inside. Serena's laptop was gone. So was the bag he'd left her. But there were tracks leading east, just like Frost had mentioned. Fresh ones. And beside them, heavier boot prints that didn't belong to Serena. Frost was already following her. Mason plunged into the woods, moving fast, following the trail through snow and underbrush. His heart hammered. His mind raced with images of what Frost would do when he caught up to her. He couldn't be too late. He wouldn't be too late. The tracks led him deeper into the forest, away from any trails, into dense trees where the snow was thinner and the ground was treacherous with hidden roots and rocks. Mason pushed through, branches whipping at his face, his breath burning in his lungs. Then he heard voices. He slowed, moving carefully now, trying to make as little noise as possible. The voices got clearer as he crept forward. "Nowhere to run." That was Frost, calm and measured. "Stay back!" Serena, scared but trying to hide it. Mason reached the edge of a small clearing and saw them. Serena stood with her back against a massive pine tree, her laptop bag clutched to her chest. Her face was pale, her breath coming in white clouds. Frost stood about 10 feet away, his hand inside his coat, clearly holding something. "This doesn't have to be difficult," Frost said. "Just give me the laptop and walk away. I'll tell my people you died in the woods. Exposure, tragic accident, they'll stop looking. You get to disappear." "You're lying." "Maybe. But it's a better offer than what happens if you make me chase you further. I sent the evidence already. Killing me doesn't change that." "No. But it sends a message to anyone else who thinks about doing what you did." Serena's hands trembled, but she didn't move. "I'm not giving you anything." Frost sighed and pulled out a gun. Small, black, efficient. He didn't point it at her yet, just held it casually, like it was an extension of his hand. "Last chance," he said. Mason stepped into the clearing. "Put it down." Frost spun, the gun coming up fast. But Mason was already moving, closing the distance, the hunting knife in his hand. He wasn't thinking anymore. Wasn't calculating. Just acting on pure instinct and 3 years of rage that had finally found a target. Frost fired. The sound was deafening in the quiet woods. The bullet went wide, snapping through branches somewhere to Mason's left. Then Mason was on him, knocking the gun away, driving them both into the snow. They hit hard. Frost was trained. Mason could feel it in the way the man moved, twisting, trying to get leverage. But Mason was bigger and angrier and fighting for something Frost couldn't understand. He drove the knife toward Frost's chest. Frost caught his wrist, barely. They struggled, faces inches apart, both breathing hard. "You're going to die for her," Frost hissed. "Maybe. But you first." Mason used his weight, pressing down, watching Frost's arm shake with the effort of holding him back. The knife got closer. Closer. Then Frost's knee came up, hard and vicious, catching Mason in the ribs. Pain exploded through his side. His grip loosened. Frost twisted, throwing him off, scrambling for the gun. Mason lunged, tackling him again before he could reach it. They rolled through the snow, trading blows, neither one gaining the upper hand. Mason felt something crack. Maybe his rib, maybe Frost's, but the pain was distant, buried under adrenaline and desperation. "Mason, move!" Serena's voice. Mason looked up just in time to see her swing a heavy branch at Frost's head. It connected with a sickening crack. Frost went limp. Mason rolled away, gasping, pain finally catching up to him. His ribs screamed. His face throbbed where Frost had landed a punch. Blood ran from somewhere, his nose maybe, or a cut above his eye. Serena dropped the branch and knelt beside him. "Are you okay?" "I've been better." Mason struggled to sit up. "You?" "I'm fine. You shouldn't have come. You should have stayed with Noah." "Yeah, well, I'm stupid like that." Frost groaned. He was alive but unconscious, blood running from a gash on his temple. Mason grabbed the gun and stood slowly, every movement agony. "We need to go before he wakes up or more people show up." "What about him?" "Leave him. The cold will wake him up eventually. Or it won't. Either way, not our problem." Serena grabbed her laptop bag and they started back through the woods. Mason leaned on her more than he wanted to admit, his ribs making it hard to breathe. The walk back to the cabin felt like it took hours. When they finally stumbled out of the trees, Mason's truck was right where he'd left it. Noah's face appeared in the window, pale and terrified. Mason opened the door and his son launched himself at him, wrapping his arms around Mason's waist. "You came back. I promised, didn't I?" Noah pulled back and looked at Serena. "You're okay. Thanks to your dad. He's good at saving people." "Yeah, he is." Mason helped Serena into the truck, then climbed into the driver's seat. His ribs protested every movement. His hand shook on the steering wheel. "Where are we going?" Serena asked. "Somewhere safe." "Where's that?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." They drove south, away from the cabin, away from Frost, away from the mountains that had stopped feeling like home. Noah fell asleep in the back seat. Serena stared out the window, silent and hollow-eyed. Around sunset, Mason pulled into a gas station and called the one person he could think of who might help. His friend from the National Guard. The one who owned the cabin. "Tommy, it's Mason. I need a favor." "Jesus, Reed, it's been, 2 years? You only call when you need something." "I know. I'm sorry. But this is important." "How important?" "Life or death, important." Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Where are you?" Mason told him. "All right, there's a motel about 30 miles west of you. Red Rock Inn. Tell them you're a friend of mine. They'll put you up, no questions. Stay there tonight. I'll come to you tomorrow, and we'll figure out what's next." "Tommy, don't thank me yet. You sound like hell, which means whatever you're into is probably going to make my life complicated. But you helped me when I needed it, so I'll return the favor. Just don't make me regret it." "I'll try not to." Mason hung up and got back in the truck. Serena looked at him. "We have a place to stay tonight?" "Yeah, a friend's helping." "You sure you can trust him?" "With my life. And yours." They drove to the Red Rock Inn, a low-slung building that looked like it had been there since the 70s and hadn't been updated since. The clerk at the desk took one look at Mason, bruised, bloody, exhausted, and didn't ask a single question. Just handed over a key to room 8 and told him checkout was at 11. The room was small and smelled like cigarettes and old carpet, but it had 2 beds and a lock on the door and hot water in the shower. That was enough. Mason got Noah settled in one bed, the kid already half asleep. Then he sat on the edge of the other bed and finally let himself feel everything, the pain in his ribs, the fear that had been clawing at him since Frost's call, the exhaustion that went bone deep. Serena sat beside him. "You're hurt," she said quietly. "I'll live." "Let me see." She pulled up his shirt before he could argue. The bruise along his ribs was already turning purple and black. She touched it gently, and Mason hissed in pain. "You might have cracked something. Wouldn't be the first time." "You should see a doctor." "Can't, not without explaining how it happened." Serena's hand stilled. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For all of this. For putting you and Noah in danger, for turning your life upside down." Her voice cracked. "You didn't ask for any of this." "No, but I chose it anyway." "Why?" Mason looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who'd crashed into his life during the worst storm in 10 years and somehow made him feel alive again for the first time since Claire died. "Because I was drowning," he said quietly, "and so were you. And I figured maybe if we held on to each other, we'd both make it to shore." Serena's eyes filled with tears. "What if we don't?" "Then at least we tried." She leaned forward and kissed him, slow and gentle this time, without the desperation of before. Mason kissed her back, his hand coming up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. When they pulled apart, Serena rested her forehead against his. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she whispered, "and I don't know what to do about it." Mason's heart did something painful and beautiful all at once. "Yeah, me too. This is a terrible idea. Probably the worst I've ever had. So what do? We survive. We get through this, and then we figure out what comes next. And if there is no next, then we make one." Serena laughed, broken and hopeful all at once. Then she curled up beside him on the bed, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. They lay there in the dim light from the lamp, listening to Noah's soft breathing, feeling the weight of everything they'd been through and everything still to come. Tomorrow, Tommy would arrive. Tomorrow, they'd figure out the next move. Tomorrow, the world would start closing in again. But tonight, for just a few hours, they could pretend they were safe. And that was enough. The next morning came with weak sunlight through thin curtains and the sound of Noah rummaging through his backpack looking for clean socks. Mason woke up with his ribs screaming and his head pounding and Serena still asleep beside him, her face peaceful in a way he'd never seen before. He slipped out of bed carefully and found Noah in the bathroom brushing his teeth. "Morning, buddy." "Morning. You look terrible." "Thanks. Does it hurt?" "A little. Mom used to say that pain means you're still alive." Mason's throat tightened. "Yeah, she did say that." Noah spit into the sink and looked up at his dad with those serious eyes that were too old for 8. "Are we going to be okay?" "Yes." "You promise?" "I promise." It was a promise Mason didn't know if he could keep, but he said it anyway, because that's what parents did. They made promises and then fought like hell to make them true. Tommy showed up around 10, driving a beat-up pickup that looked even older than Mason's. He was built like a brick wall with a shaved head and tattoos running down both arms. He took one look at Mason and whistled low. "Man, you look like you got hit by a truck." "Feels like it too." Tommy glanced at Serena, then at Noah, then back at Mason. "So, you going to tell me what kind of trouble you're in, or do I have to guess?" "It's complicated. It always is with you." They sat in the motel room and Mason told him everything. The crash, Serena's identity, the evidence, Frost, the fight in the woods, all of it. Tommy listened without interrupting, his face getting harder with every sentence. When Mason finished, Tommy said, "You're out of your mind." "I know. You've got a billionaire fugitive, a professional killer on your tail, and a kid who's going to need therapy for the rest of his life." "I know." "And you still think you can fix this?" "I have to try." Tommy looked at Serena. "You really sent that evidence to the feds?" "Yes." "And they're actually going to do something with it?" "I hope so. Hope's not a plan. It's all I've got." Tommy shook his head, but Mason could see the gears turning behind his eyes. The man had always been a problem solver. It's what made him good in the Guard, and even better afterward. "All right," Tommy said finally. "Here's what we're going to do. I've got a place, a real safe house, not some cabin in the woods. It's about 6 hours from here, middle of nowhere, owned by a guy who doesn't ask questions. You take Serena there, you lay low, and you let the legal system do its thing." "And what about Frost?" "Frost is a problem, but he's not your problem anymore. You give me his description, everything you know about him, and I'll make some calls. I've got friends who can make life very difficult for people like him." "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering. You saved my life in Kandahar, Reed. I owe you. Now I'm paying it back." Mason felt something loosen in his chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We've still got to get you there alive." They loaded into Tommy's truck. Mason, Serena, and Noah in the cab, their few belongings in the back. Mason left his truck at the motel with the keys on the tire. It was registered to him, which meant it was a liability now. He'd get it later if there was a later. The drive was long and tense. Tommy took back roads, avoiding highways, checking his mirrors constantly. Noah fell asleep against Serena's shoulder. She stroked his hair absently, staring out at the passing landscape. "You okay?" Mason asked her quietly. "I don't know. Ask me when this is over." "When will it be over?" "When I testify. When the people who killed those workers are in prison. when I can look at myself in the mirror without hating what I see. You're doing the right thing now. That has to count for something. Does it? Or am I just trying to ease my guilt by dragging good people into my mess? You didn't drag me. I jumped. Serena looked at him, and her smile was sad and grateful all at once. Why do you do that? Do what? Make everything sound simpler than it is. Because complicated doesn't help anyone. Simple is all we've got. They reached the safe house just after dark. It was exactly like Tommy had described. Isolated, anonymous, forgettable. A small ranch house at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by fields that stretched to the horizon. Tommy introduced them to the owner, a weathered man in his 60s who called himself Dutch, and didn't ask a single question about why they needed to disappear. He showed them to a room, pointed out where the food was, and told them to make themselves at home. Stay as long as you need, Dutch said. Just don't bring trouble to my door. We'll do our best, Mason said. That night they ate dinner together, canned soup and stale crackers, the best meal Mason had tasted in days. Noah talked about school and dinosaurs and everything except the fear that had been following them for weeks. Serena listened like every word mattered. After Noah went to bed, Mason and Serena sat on the porch watching the stars come out. What happens now? She asked. We wait. You hear from your contact, the investigation moves forward, and eventually you testify. And then? Then you're free. Am I? Or do I just trade one prison for another? Mason took her hand. That's up to you. What if I want to stay? Here with you and Noah. What if I want to build something real instead of running back to the life I had? Then you stay. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I'm broken, Mason. I've spent my whole life hurting people and chasing power and convincing myself that was enough. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. Serena laughed, but it was full of pain. You make it sound easy. It's not, but nothing worth doing ever is. She looked at him, and in the starlight her face was open and vulnerable in a way that took his breath away. If I stay, she said quietly, I'm going to hurt you, not on purpose. But I will. Because I don't know how to let people love me without pushing them away. Then I'll be there when you push, and I'll stay anyway. Why? Because that's what love is. Showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Serena's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. Yeah, well, I don't deserve you either, so I guess we're even. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate and full of all the things neither of them knew how to say. Mason kissed her back, his hands in her hair, his heart breaking and healing all at once. When they finally pulled apart, they sat there holding each other under the vast sky. Two broken people who'd found each other in the storm and decided to hold on. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new fears, new battles. But tonight, they had this. And for now, that was enough. The waiting was harder than the running. Days stretched into weeks at Dutch's safe house, each one bleeding into the next with nothing to mark them except the slow healing of Mason's ribs and the gradual softening of the fear in Serena's eyes. Noah adapted the way kids always did, turning the strange house into an adventure, exploring the fields, asking Dutch 1,000 questions about farming and tractors and whether cows could really sleep standing up. Mason watched his son laugh and play and slowly forget to be scared, and he felt something shift inside him. For 3 years, he'd measured success by survival, getting through another day, paying another bill, keeping the motel standing for one more month. But here, watching Noah chase grasshoppers through tall grass while Serena sat on the porch sketching in a notebook Dutch had given her, Mason realized survival wasn't the same as living. He'd forgotten what living felt like. 2 weeks after they arrived, Serena's phone rang. She'd been using a burner Tommy had provided, one number known to exactly one person, her contact at the federal prosecutor's office. Mason watched her face go pale as she answered. Yes, I understand. When? A pause. 3 days, all right. I'll be there. She hung up and looked at Mason, her hand trembling. They're ready. The grand jury indicted 12 people, including the CEO and the entire executive board. Trial starts in 3 weeks. They want me to come in for prep and protective custody. That's good news, Mason said, but his stomach was already twisting. Yeah, it is. Serena set down the phone. They're sending marshals to pick me up, day after tomorrow. And then? Then I testify. Then I go into witness protection until the trial ends. Then she stopped, her voice breaking. Then I don't know. Noah looked up from where he was playing with toy cars on the floor. You're leaving? Serena's face crumpled. Yeah, sweetheart, I have to. For how long? I don't know. Are you coming back? Serena looked at Mason, desperate for an answer he couldn't give. I hope so. Noah's lower lip trembled. That's what people say when they're not coming back. He stood up and ran to his room, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Mason started to go after him, but Serena caught his arm. Let me, she said quietly. She knocked on Noah's door and waited. After a moment, a small voice said, Come in. Mason stood in the hallway listening. I'm sorry, Serena said. I know you're mad at me. I'm not mad. I'm sad. Yeah, me too. Why do you have to go? Because I did some bad things, and now I need to help make them right. And that means telling people the truth about what happened, even though it's scary. Can't you do that from here? No, sweetie. I have to do it in a courtroom with lawyers and judges and all these other people. And then you'll come back? Serena was quiet for a long time. I don't know if I can. The people I'm telling the truth about, they're very powerful. And even after I testify, they might still be dangerous, which means I might have to go somewhere far away where they can't find me. That's not fair. No, it's not. I don't want you to go. I don't want to go either. But Noah, listen to me. Serena's voice was thick with tears. You and your dad, you saved my life. Not just from the crash or from the bad people chasing me. You saved the part of me that I thought was dead. You showed me what it feels like to be part of a family again, to care about people without it being a transaction, to be loved without having to earn it. We do love you. I know. And I love you too. More than I thought I could love anyone. She paused. That's why I have to do this. Because if I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life running, and I can't ask you and your dad to run with me. You deserve better than that. I don't want better. I want you. Mason heard Serena's breath hitch, and then the sound of her crying. Really crying, the way people cried when they'd been holding it in for too long and couldn't anymore. I want you too, she whispered. Both of you. So much it hurts. Then stay. I can't. You could if you wanted to. No, baby, I really can't. But I promise you, if there's any way for me to come back, I will, okay? Okay. Mason heard movement, and then Serena emerged from the room with her eyes red and her face blotchy. She looked at him and shook her head. I can't do this, she said. Yes, you can. Mason, I can't walk away from him. From you, I can't. He pulled her into his arms and held her while she fell apart. Over her shoulder, he could see Noah in his room, sitting on the bed with tears streaming down his face, trying so hard to be brave. This was what breaking felt like. Not the sudden violence of a car crash or a fight in the snow, just the slow, inevitable fracture of something that couldn't hold the weight anymore. The next 2 days passed in a strange haze of forced normalcy. They made meals together, played cards, took walks through the fields, all of them pretending this wasn't ending even though they all knew it was. On the last night, after Noah had finally cried himself to sleep, Mason and Serena sat on the porch watching the stars. I keep trying to figure out how to make this different, Serena said quietly. How to stay without destroying everything. But I can't find it. Because there isn't one. Sometimes there's no good choice, just the least bad one. And this is the least bad? Yeah, I think it is. Serena leaned her head on his shoulder. I hate it. Me too. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets and distant cows and the wind moving through the grass. When Claire died, Mason said finally, I thought that was it. I thought I'd used up my one chance at loving someone and I'd never get another one. And for 3 years, I was okay with that. Or I told myself I was. But then you crashed into my life, literally, and you reminded me that the heart doesn't stop working just because it's been broken. It finds new ways to beat. Serena turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. And I know the timing's terrible, and the circumstances are worse, and we barely know each other. But I love you anyway. And if you want to come back after this is over, if there's any possible way, I'll be here. We'll be here. Mason, I'm not asking for promises. I'm not asking you to choose between your safety and us. I'm just telling you that the door's open, always. Serena kissed him then, desperate and hungry and heartbroken all at once. They made love that night in the small room Dutch had given them, trying to memorize each other with their hands and mouths, and the whispered words they'd never said before, and might never say again. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the dark, and Serena said, "What if I can't come back? What if witness protection means I disappear forever? Then I'll remember you anyway, and so will Noah. And maybe that has to be enough." "It's not enough. I know, but it's what we have." The marshals arrived at dawn. Two of them, professional and efficient, with a black SUV and instructions to move fast. They gave Serena 10 minutes to say goodbye. Noah clung to her, his small body shaking with sobs. "I don't want you to go." "I know, baby, I know." Serena knelt down so she was eye level with him. "But I need you to be strong, okay? I need you to take care of your dad for me. Can you do that?" "He takes care of me." "I know, but he needs someone to take care of him too, and you're the best person for the job." Noah nodded through his tears. Serena pulled something out of her pocket, a small bracelet made of woven grass that Noah had made her 2 days ago. "I'm going to keep this with me," she said, "and whenever I look at it, I'm going to remember the little boy who taught me that family isn't just the people you're born with. It's the people who choose to love you even when you give them every reason not to." She hugged him one more time, then stood and turned to Mason. They didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said in the dark hours of the previous night. Mason just pulled her close and held her, feeling her heart beat against his chest, memorizing the way she fit in his arms. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. If I can come back, I'll be here." One of the marshals cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we need to go." Serena pulled away, wiping her eyes. She picked up the small bag she'd packed and walked to the SUV without looking back. Mason knew if she looked back, she'd lose her courage. The SUV pulled away, kicking up dust on the dirt road. Mason and Noah stood on the porch, watching until it disappeared over the horizon. "Is she really gone?" Noah asked quietly. "Yeah, buddy, she's really gone." "Forever?" "I don't know." Noah buried his face in Mason's shirt and cried, and Mason held him and cried too, and neither of them tried to hide it. The next 3 weeks were the longest of Mason's life. Tommy helped them get back to the motel, which was exactly as Mason had left it, falling apart, drowning in debt, one strong wind away from collapse. But it was home. Mason threw himself into repairs with a vengeance, fixing everything he could reach. Broken pipes, cracked windows, the heating system that had finally given up completely. He worked until his hands bled and his body ached, and he was too exhausted to think about Serena or where she was or whether she was safe. Noah went back to school, started talking to a counselor about everything that had happened, slowly, day by day, began to smile again. And Mason watched the news obsessively, waiting for any mention of the Vail Industries trial. Came on a Tuesday afternoon. The headlines were everywhere. Vail Industries CEO arrested. Massive corporate fraud case goes to trial. Whistleblower testimony rocks boardroom. Mason read every article he could find. Serena's name was mentioned only once, in passing, as a former executive who provided crucial evidence. The journalist didn't know she was the heart of the whole thing, the person who'd risked everything to make it right. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Mason followed every update, reading transcripts when he could find them, watching news coverage when he couldn't. And then on a Friday morning, the verdict came down. Guilty. All 12 defendants. Multiple counts of fraud, manslaughter, obstruction of justice. The CEO got 20 years. The rest got sentences ranging from 5 to 15. The company was ordered to pay over $1 billion in damages to the families of the workers who died. It was over. Mason stood in the motel office, staring at his laptop screen, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight for months. She'd done it. Serena had actually done it, but there was no word about what happened to her next. No mention of where she'd gone or what witness protection meant for her future. Just silence. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Life continued. Mason kept the motel running, barely. The bank finally foreclosed, but instead of kicking him out, they offered him a deal. buy the place at a reduced price, or lose it entirely. Mason didn't have the money, but Tommy knew people who knew people, and somehow a loan appeared with terms Mason could actually manage. It felt like a miracle, or like someone was pulling strings behind the scenes. Noah turned 9, started playing baseball, made friends who came over to the motel and thought it was cool to live somewhere that had a pool, even if the pool hadn't worked in 4 years. And Mason learned to live with the ache of Serena's absence. It didn't go away, but it became part of him, like the scar on his hand from when he'd cut himself fixing a fence, or the grief for Claire that he'd carry forever. Some losses you didn't get over. You just learned to carry them differently. 8 months after Serena left, on a cold November morning, Mason was replacing the sign outside the motel when a car pulled into the parking lot. He didn't recognize it at first. A sensible sedan, nothing flashy, the kind of car that blended into traffic. But then the driver's door opened and Serena stepped out. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, lighter. She wore jeans and a sweater instead of the expensive clothes she'd shown up in. But her eyes were the same. Those pale gray eyes that had haunted Mason's dreams for months. Mason dropped the screwdriver he was holding. It clattered on the pavement. "Hi," Serena said. "Hi." They stared at each other across the parking lot, neither one moving, both afraid this was a dream that would shatter if they got too close. "I didn't know if you'd still be here," Serena said finally. "Where else would I be?" "I don't know, somewhere better. Somewhere that didn't remind you of everything that happened." "This is home, for better or worse." Serena took a step closer. "I couldn't come back right away. The trial, the sentencing, the appeals, it took months to make sure it was really over. And even then, the marshals wanted me to stay in protection." "But you didn't." "No. I told them I had somewhere I needed to be, someone I needed to see." She smiled, and it was tentative and hopeful and terrified all at once. "I told them I had a family waiting for me." Mason closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. She wrapped herself around him, holding on like she was afraid he might disappear. "I'm sorry I was gone so long," she whispered. "You're here now. That's what matters." "Is Noah inside doing homework? Does he? He asks about you every single day." Serena pulled back, tears streaming down her face. "Can I see him?" "Yeah, of course." They walked to the apartment together, Mason's hand in hers, both of them shaking. Mason opened the door and called out, "Noah? Someone's here to see you." Noah appeared from his room, his math book in his hand. He looked up, and his eyes went wide. "Serena?" "Hi, sweetheart." Noah dropped the book and ran. He crashed into her so hard he almost knocked her over, his arms wrapping around her waist, his face buried in her sweater. "You came back," he sobbed. "You really came back. I told you I would if I could. I didn't believe you. I know, but I meant it." They stood there in the doorway, the 3 of them, holding on to each other like they were the only solid things in a world that had tried so hard to tear them apart. Later, after Noah had finally calmed down enough to let Serena breathe, they sat together in the small apartment and she told them everything. The trial, the testimony, the guilty verdicts, the months in witness protection, living under a name that wasn't hers, in a place that felt like a prison, even though she was free. "They wanted me to stay," she said, "to build a new life somewhere safe, but I couldn't. Because the life I wanted wasn't somewhere safe. It was here, with you 2, even if that meant taking risks." "What does that mean?" Mason asked. "Are you still in danger?" "No. The people I testified against are in prison. The company's been dissolved. The threats are gone. I'm free to live wherever I want, be whoever I want." She looked at Mason, her eyes bright. "So I'm choosing this. You, Noah. This falling apart motel in the middle of nowhere." "It's not much," Mason said. "It's everything." That night, after Noah had fallen asleep between them on the couch during a movie, Mason and Serena talked about the future. "I have money," Serena said quietly. "Not as much as I used to, but enough. Enough to fix this place up. Enough to pay off your debts. Enough to give us a real chance." "I can't take your money." "Why not?" "Because I need to do this myself." That's pride talking. And pride doesn't keep the roof from leaking. Mason laughed despite himself. "Fair point. Let me help, Mason. Not because you need saving, but because I want to build something with you. Something that's ours." She took his hand. I spent my whole life chasing power and money and success, and it made me hollow. But these last 8 months, even when I was scared and alone, I kept thinking about this place, about you and Noah, about how you made me feel human again. And I want more of that. I want to wake up next to you. I want to help Noah with his homework. I want to argue with you about paint colors and whether we should finally fix that pool, Schwassen. The pool's unfixable. Then we'll build a new one. Mason looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who'd crashed into his life during the worst storm he'd ever seen and somehow became the reason the sun came out again. Okay, he said. Let's do it. Let's fix this place up. Let's build something together. Yeah? Yeah. Serena kissed him, and it felt like coming home. Over the next year, they rebuilt the Mountain Ridge Motel from the ground up. Serena hired contractors to fix the structural damage Mason had been patching with duct tape and prayers for years. They replaced the roof, the heating system, the plumbing. They repainted every room, replaced the furniture, landscaped the grounds. The pool turned out to be fixable after all, and by summer it was full of clear blue water and Noah's friends splashing around like they'd never had so much fun. The motel transformed from a place people ended up into a place people chose. Reviews started appearing online. Hidden gem in the mountains, best family-owned motel we've ever stayed at. The owners actually care. Mason and Serena worked side by side, arguing about details and laughing at disasters and slowly learning how to be partners in every sense of the word. It wasn't always easy. Serena still had moments where the ice came back, where she pulled away and tried to handle everything alone. And Mason still had moments where the fear crept in, where he waited for the other shoe to drop, for this happiness to be ripped away like everything else he'd loved. But they worked through it. They talked, they fought, they forgave, they learned, and Noah thrived. He had a mother figure who showed up to his baseball games and helped with his science projects and never missed a parent-teacher conference. He had a father who was learning to smile again, to hope again, to believe that tomorrow might actually be better than today. One evening, almost exactly 2 years after Serena had first crashed near the motel, Mason and Serena stood outside watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. You ever think about what would have happened if I'd driven past that night? Mason asked. If I just stayed inside and let someone else find you? Every day, Serena said. And it terrifies me. Why? Because I would have died, either in that car or later, when Frost caught up with me. But more than that, I would have died still being the person I was, cold, empty, convinced that caring about people was weakness. She turned to look at him. You saved my life, Mason. Not just physically. You saved the part of me that still believed people could be good. You did the same for me. I was drowning before you showed up. I didn't even realize it, but I was. And you reminded me what it felt like to fight for something instead of just surviving it. Serena smiled. So we saved each other. Yeah, I guess we did. That's pretty rare, you know, finding someone who sees you at your worst and decides you're worth saving anyway. Yeah, well, I'm stubborn like that. I've noticed. Mason pulled her close, and they stood there watching the light fade from the sky while the motel hummed with life behind them, guests checking in, Noah's laughter echoing from somewhere inside, the sound of water running through pipes that actually worked. You know what the funny thing is? Mason said. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered, and all I could do was hold on and hope I didn't lose any more. But I was wrong. About what? About endings. Because what felt like the end was actually just the middle, the worst part of the story before everything changed. He looked at Serena. Claire used to say that storms don't last forever, and she was right. But what she didn't tell me is that sometimes the best things in life show up in the middle of the storm. And if you're brave enough to hold on, you make it through to something better on the other side. Serena's eyes were bright with tears. You think we made it through?
Yeah, I think we did. So what now? Now we keep building, keep fighting, keep showing up for each other. Mason smiled. And maybe we fix that busted sign out front, the one that still says vacancy even when we're full. Serena laughed. Always the practical one. Someone has to be.
They went inside together, where Noah was setting the table for dinner and arguing with himself about whether dinosaurs could have survived if they'd just moved to the mountains when the meteor hit. Where the apartment smelled like the pasta sauce Serena had been making all afternoon. Where home wasn't a place anymore but a feeling, built from second chances and hard-won hope and the stubborn belief that broken things could be made whole again. Because that's what they'd learned, the three of them, through all the fear and danger and heartbreak, that people weren't defined by their worst moments. They were defined by what they did after, by whether they gave up or kept fighting, by whether they let their scars turn them cold or used them as proof that they'd survived something hard and come out stronger. Serena had spent years chasing power and money and success, only to find that none of it mattered when she was alone. Mason had spent years just trying to survive, only to discover that survival without hope was just another kind of dying. And Noah, young as he was, had learned that family wasn't about blood or perfect people or happily ever afters that came easy. Family was about showing up, about staying when things got hard, about choosing to love people even when, especially when, they were messy and broken and struggling to figure out how to be better. The motel they'd rebuilt together stood as proof of that. It wasn't perfect. There were still rooms that needed work, still repairs waiting to be made, still challenges ahead. But it was theirs, built with their own hands, their own money, their own sweat and tears and stubborn refusal to give up. And every person who stayed there, every traveler who found refuge in those walls, carried a piece of that story with them when they left. The story of a broke single father who chose kindness when he had nothing else to give. The story of a ruthless CEO who learned that redemption was possible if you were brave enough to face what you'd done. The story of a little boy who taught two broken adults that love wasn't complicated. It was the simplest thing in the world if you just let yourself feel it. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and indifferent, just like they always had. But inside the Mountain Ridge Motel, warmth and laughter and hope filled every corner. And three people who'd found each other in the worst storm of their lives sat down to dinner together, grateful for second chances and brave enough to keep choosing each other, one imperfect day at a time. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Show up, hold on, love fiercely even when it scares us, and trust that sometimes the best things in life aren't the ones we plan for. They're the ones that crash into us when we least expect it and remind us that we're stronger than we think, braver than we believe, and more worthy of love than we ever dared to hope.